Welcome, learners. I am Dr. Tarang Kapoor and I teach philosophy at Miranda House, University of Delhi. This lecture is on professional ethics and introduction. Based on the variety of concepts and nature of the problem, ethics is subdivided in some main approaches like normative ethics, meta-ethics, applied ethics, among others. Professional ethics comes under applied ethics, wherein we attempt to resolve the realistic issues such as conflicts of interest in a profession, like doctor patient relationship, surrogacy, abortion, environmental issues, suicide, euthanasia, capital punishment, among others, with the help of ethical principles. Professional ethics falls into the domain of applied ethics because it is concerned with rules, regulations, norms which are to be followed by any profession. And these rules ultimately fall back on the concept of what is good, right, or appropriate in a given situation. Hence, we can say that professional ethics is used as a generic term which combines under a single umbrella the occupational ethics of medicine, law, journalism, business, among other fields. Professional ethics can be then seen in alliance with legal ethics, medical ethics, and hence it's an intersection of individual fields. Alternatively, it refers to doctrines and concepts specific to all subject specific subfields. We've already studied the importance of ethics and values along with the basic moral principles which are applied in different fields in previous lectures. Before we delve into professional ethics, we must understand the term profession, professional, and professionalism. Pertinent questions remain. What is the distinguishing feature of a professional? Is he or she different from other individuals? And if so, how is he different? Does he or she have special rights and responsibilities towards the society? What is meant by professionalism? Can we expect any special ethical conduct out of a professional or not? Profession is a kind of job that requires a special training or skill, especially one that needs a high level of education, such as medical, legal, or higher education in terms of teaching professional, high level of cognitive knowledge and practical skills in a university or a higher educational institution is required. Professional is someone connected with a job that needs special training or skill. There can be different criteria for professionalism. Professional training being an intellectual, autonomy in function, professional judgment, mindset of service, commitment, and pride in the profession. Of course, along with meeting the criteria, a professional should also exhibit the following characters like expertise in terms of knowledge, a skill set, general orientation towards public and society interest, self regulation in work, community service, high levels of ethics, and high levels of reward oriented work. Professionals undertake responsibilities like advancement of knowledge, publication of information, maintenance of associations of professionals to advance the goals of that particular profession, promotion of well being of co professionals, development and maintenance of standards, control of access to the profession, and maintenance of a clean image of the profession. Applied ethics, as we have already seen, deals with these real life situations where we try to find out the moral possibility of specific actions. It seems to be an important requirement to consider the conditions and circumstances in which an action has been performed or about to be performed before taking any decision about the rightness or wrongness of that action. It demands to think and reflect upon the whole situation. We observe that our moral judgments, notions of truth and falsity, right, wrong, are always dependent on the context or perspective of a culture. What is right and acceptable in one cultural practice may not be acceptable in another. The possibility of accepting universal values would then be just difficult to apply universally. The problem arises when sometimes we find ourselves in such a situation wherein it becomes so difficult to take a decision in line with the fundamental ethical principles. Ethical dilemmas of real life situations involve much more layers of complexities, which make it too hard to resolve these dilemmas based on any single conventional principle. The issues and debates of applied ethics then demand a critical analysis and an evaluation of our conventional moral principles. Morality should not be considered as preachment to live an ideal life merely. Being an integral element of philosophy, there always remains the scope to reason, to think, to critically analyze, and examine the customary and traditional set of principles, to question the eternal nature of these principles. This is how we move towards the path of reflective morality in order to test the effectiveness of the norms which are pre established as if, and whenever it is required, we are able to reflect on the requirements in the given situation. Reflective morality then does not reject the conventional moral principles, it only helps in reaching a better decision by presenting an approach that either adds some novel elements or subtracts the unnecessary element to resolve a particular issue. Suppose, for example, a person who works as an accountant in a big private firm finds that his father gets seriously ill and has to be hospitalized. He then requires a bulk amount of money for father's operation and further treatment. His boss is very strict and then believes that if he would ask for money from the boss, his boss will never provide him. That is when he can take the money from company's account without informing the boss in order to save the life of his father. He saves his father's life eventually, and gradually with time, he returns all the money back into the accounts of the company. Now, the question is how we would determine the rightness or wrongness of the act performed here. The person is in an ethical dilemma. He knows that stealing money cannot be said a morally right action, but at that time, saving someone's life was more important and primary action. This means he select the means he has selected were obviously not a professionally right one, but he did it under unavoidable circumstances where he did not have any other available option for saving life of his father. Keeping the whole situation in mind then, we may ask what action his boss would have taken now. Should he punish his employee for not informing him or for not taking his permission before taking the money? The answer could not simply be given in affirmative or negative terms as it requires reflecting upon the criticality of the whole situation. In situations like these, the need arises to think in a different direction, and it also requires careful and critical examination of the customary moral principles. Now, the term professionalism stands for the way one performs their action in a profession. This may include a bundle of things in itself the practices, the standards, values, skills, education, training, background. A whole range of concepts go into somebody becoming a professional. Professionalism requires mastery over the theoretical knowledge, but also it requires the theoretical competence is supplemented with practical knowledge. A professional should be able to implement the theory into his practice. Professional ethics, as the name suggests, defines and codifies certain ethical norms which are necessary for all the professionals. We find codes of conduct and codes of ethics in professionals. The codes of conduct may vary according to different professions. Engineers will be having different codes of conduct from those of medical associations, but we will find a guiding moral principle in every profession available. So, engineers can have a different one from medical professionals, and medical professionals can have a different one from media professionals or from those of the legal professionals. But every profession has a code. These moral principles then govern the behavior of that particular profession in ethical decision making, specifically in a situation of dilemmas. An organization, institution, or company is committed to certain values and it includes ethical responsibilities of a profession. Transparency, impartialness, openness, and loyalty are few desirable characteristic traits of a professional. Let us take one example which highlights the unprofessional behavior of a company. Cases of raid and arrest of call center employees were registered in the past. The charge was that the employees used to extort money from the foreign nationals. A large amount of money has been taken away from citizens of other countries by these call centers. These call centers employed young people for this work and trained them into the foreign language. These employees used to call people from other countries, treated them with threat scares, and forced them to pay millions of dollars. Despite continued complaints against this particular company, no action was taken against them. There are several ethical issues which need to be addressed in situations like these. Some can be that these types of actions lead us to think how young generation can easily be provoked by the call centers to involve in the unlawful activities only to gain large amount of monies by keeping away all the values of honesty, transparency, dignity, and respect. Secondly, the unprofessional attitude of the call center pulls down the reputation and image of all the other such call centers of the country. And inaction and unprofessionalism shown at the level of our own country also affects the relation of our country with other countries and its image at the global level. So these unethical acts always involve a risk of losing the job, risk of being caught, arrested, losing self-respect, despite being aware of the risk factors involved in these unethical acts. What is the guiding factor that encourages people to perform these actions? Why money factor? The accumulation of money for personal gains stands over and above all the moral values and respect for one another and other people's life or loss of property even. These kinds of manipulated use of authority and power in professions offers may seem tempting at first sight, but neither the intention of doing these acts nor can the outcome be said to be good or right for anyone involved in this act. These kinds of cases are a matter of concern for everyone. These incidents usually come and go without much attention of people, as if we come across these cases daily and we are habituated and used to hearing these instances like merely any other information. The problem is much, much deeper. One should not take these issues lightly. In fact, they should be dealt with at the level of moral fabric of the society. If these instances often happen, it does not mean that more frequency or their occurrences reduces the seriousness or the gravity of the issue. But we should ask, the gravity of the issue should rather be more come into focus and be taken seriously when all the moral values, laws, rules, and codes of conduct fail to stop or at least reduce the frequency of these illegal actions and lead us all to think on reasons of failure to control such actions. So now we should look into responsibility and rights of professionals. The rights and responsibility of a professional are very important with respect to ethical issues. An individual has certain rights guaranteed by the constitution of the country in which she lives, as we have rights and responsibilities as citizens, like right to life, personal liberty, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, right to freedom cultural expression, educational rights, rights to constitutional remedies, right to property, information, accommodation, among others. Professionals may be salaried employees or self-employed. When someone is self-employed, his professional responsibilities are more clear because a second agency, like an employer, is not involved. In that case, conflicting situations are less likely to occur. However, when we look at the rights of the employed people under someone, then they are more clear and laid out in a official manner. So in the case of self-employed professionals, one has to find his or her own way of taking decisions on the correct course of action independently. The basic professional responsibility of public safety and welfare does not change. One has to keep that the focus of their work. One's duty to the profession does not change, of course. He or she has to be committed to the profession and promote the image of the profession and credibility of all the other professionals. The professional has to create his or her own norms and standards for professional conduct and follow them seriously. He or she also has to ensure that such norms stand the scrutiny of any professional society. Employee professional work for the government or private sector can be on both the organizations. They are not independent, unlike the self-employed professionals about whom we discussed a while back. In addition to basic professional responsibilities, employed professionals have the responsibility to work with other professionals for some common cause like teamwork, performing an action together, performing and executing a task together, also show allegiance to all the other employees as well as the employer. They have certain responsibilities which can be enumerated thus: commitment to the profession, they have to appreciate the profession, they have shared vision of growth for the institution in which they're employed, correct sense of loyalty they should develop. Now this is an important point and we'll discuss this uh, after a while in detail. Confidentiality, of course, they have to maintain confidentiality, they have to respect the authority, and they have to be accountable towards the institution. Now, what are the rights of an employee? A professional has some rights. We have just discussed the responsibilities, but it's important to come to know about the rights. Somebody who has joined an institution, what are the rights they are bounded by? So, you have the right to pursue your profession in a free and fair manner by freely expressing your professional judgment. You have the right to perform your professional duties according to your best professional judgment without being coerced into other kinds of decisions. You have the right to refuse, that is, the right to refuse to do anything that is unprofessional or unethical. And we can think examples of gender justice and gender disparities or disparities at workplace. Within this and within the bounds of confidentiality, one has a right to talk freely about their professional matters, and also one has a right to pursue their professional interests such as higher studies or research without hampering their contractual obligation. They also have the right to be a member of professional organizations that promote the profession and take active part in activities related to that profession. They have the right to engage in activities that uphold their professional responsibility of public safety and welfare despite their loyalty to the employees towards the employers. Also, they have the right to recognition of their professional services, including remuneration and other rewards being part of the profession. They also have a right to go to public with unethical acts like whistleblowing, which is a concept which got very famous during the recent past. And these responsibilities of the professionals and rights have been taken from Professional Ethics Includes Human Values by R. Subramaniam. Let us take example of issues of digital access to understand professional ethics in the area of digital technology. Now, according to Benjamin Compain, the phrase digital divide, which is an ethical issue which we face in the area of information ethics, is a new label for earlier concept of information haves and information have-nots. Coined in the mid-90s, the expression digital divide is now commonly used to describe the disparity that exists between those who have access to information and community technology and those who do not have access. Compare defines the digital divide as the perceived gap between those who have and who do not have access to informational tools and ability to use those tools. Hence, the digital divide can be understood as the gap, perceived or real, between those who have and those who do not have either access to information technology or the knowledge and ability to use technology, or both. So, one can be that people do not have access, and the other can be that they do have access, but they do not have the ability or the knowledge. So, they were never trained into knowing how to use them. So, there are both kinds of factors can be responsible for digital divide. Now, how is digital divide an ethical issue? While technological outputs or want nots have the ability to exercise autonomy and choice with respect to ICT, have-nots, on the other hand, do not typically enjoy this option. Is every kind of divide or division regarding unequal access to goods necessarily then an ethical problem? Consider that there might be an indefinite number of divides that could conceivably be framed. For example, one might note that there is a divide between those who have and those who do not have Mercedes Benz. What does it mean to say that something important is at issue in the context of a division between one or more groups? And is having access to ICT something that is important in this sense at all? First, we can say that whether there is anything intrinsically valuable about ICT, like anything inherently in technology itself that makes it valuable on its own. So, these are the kind of ethical questions about intrinsic good or instrumental good which will come into play while understanding whether digital divide is an ethical issue or not. The answer to this question will be no, since ICT provides a means to some further end, and ICT itself is not a means, is not an intrinsic value on its own terms. Thus, it would seem that ICT is an instrumental good merely. But automobiles and televisions are also instrumental goods because they too serve as means to ends, that is, to transportation or to entertainment. Note that we are not inclined to argue that people who lack access to these technologies are deprived of something vitally important then. So, why should not having access to ICT be viewed any differently? Now, Jeremy Moss has argued that not having access to a form of technology that is instrumentally vital for access to other goods in today's age, goods like employment, knowledge about one's health outcomes, or access to even democratic institutions is essentially then a threat to one's own well-being. So we know that ICT is the tool through which we access all the other goods in today's age. Now this then can be a threat to my existence if I do not have an access to technology. It is for this reason that Moss believes that persons who do not have access to ICT are constrained through not having the resources to do something important for their well-being. Moss claims that because access to knowledge is lessened or prevented by the digital divide, people who are deprived of access to ICT are not able to benefit from the increasing range of information on the internet, and thus they fail further, they fall and they fail further behind others. Second, because of barriers to participation in the decision-making process in developing countries, people in remote areas who have no access to ICT may have no means of participating in the national debates or even receiving information about important developmental matters, policies, among others. Thirdly, not having access to digital resources can severely hinder the prospects that developing countries have for economic growth. Moss believes that because so much of world growth is driven by the information and communication sector, people living in countries that are not part of this sector then stand disadvantaged. So we just saw how in any profession with which we are attached as working individuals, ethical conduct and ethical requirements have to be deliberated upon and are a matter of value. With this, I will give you a list of references which you can refer to further read on this subject matter. Thank you.